Welcome to 5-Year Retrospective Visual Design. We are here on day 2 of Ministravaganza number 7. I am Simone Elliott, head of studio. We have
7.06.
Whoa. This is about visual design, not math.
I don't do math.
No math in art. Except when Marco does it. No, there's a lot of math.
Oh yeah, you have a lot of math. Let's start. We can introduce Marco.
I am the sculpting director. Hi.
I'm just your singular will experience because all Ministravaganza experiences are required to have at least one will.
Got it. And then we have Dallas Kemp.
Hello.
I like she did let you say your name. Like maybe
That's
you
true.
would just,
I like the name Dallas Kemp, though.
Yeah.
I say it a lot.
Wow. And I'm Josh Cologne. I'm the art director.
Awesome.
Director?
Director with a P.
Disruptor.
the Art Raptor.
Yeah,
Art
the
Raptor.
Raptor.
Oh, Art Raptor is
Yeah.
100%.
That's good. I need a
Josh
t-shirt.
Art Raptor.
So we're
Love it.
going to talk about how our visual design has changed over these 5 years of the studio. And now, we already have a slide. We're ready now.
Yeah, sure, put it up. I don't know what's happening.
Take it to the top.
You've gone way off of everything that I had planned. So obviously when we started, we had our little 5-year retrospective about the start of the studio last night. Today we wanted to really dive into how the visual design, our thought processes on it, just kind of have a roundtable about how some of this stuff has changed over time, how we've evolved the look of some of the games, how we view moving forward, and we have all of the original kind of folks or the people directly involved in it to do that. So when the studio started, we actually didn't have an art director on staff. We worked with a great freelancer named Zoe, who helped get all of the different visual designs done, did all of the original tactic card art, and found us a bunch of great artists to do it. And really at the time, the kind of idea that we had as a studio behind that was we wanted to really ground the game in comics. The MCU was hugely popular, and you kind of had a couple of different tracks to go with your design. You could go the movie style, which had its own cast of characters, its own brand rules and stuff to it. Or you could go within comics, or you could do one of the animated series, but you do have to pick a lane as far as like what the vision for your product's gonna be, where it's gonna go. And so we decided to really ground ourselves in the comics, because everyone here was a huge comic fan and loved Marvel and all the different publishing, but B, because it also had the widest breadth. There's so many different variations of characters, so many different story arcs, so many different creative teams have worked with it, and it just provided us kind of an infinite realm of possibility to play around with and explore. And so a lot of the art that we're going to look at to start, which I'm sure Dallas can talk a little bit about from the creative perspective, you'll see has that really kind of 80s, 90s comic book feel to it, with the colors, with the lines, with everything else. Still a huge fan of so much of this art to begin with. But Dallas, if you want to talk a little bit about some of the thoughts behind it, Josh, if you want to add in some of your art director fancy words, please do.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see, like when we started, we were finding ourselves a lot, right? And we went with art, we went with comics, we went with in the I always say 70s and 80s, right? We were talking last night a little bit about this or the other day, and it's 70s and 80s, but as we kept moving, we kept finding what we liked and what we wanted to push and where to grow. So then that's what this whole panel is about, is like watching how we mentally have matured or moved or pivoted, however you want to say it, right? And going from very classic 1970s and moving up through to broader, bigger, more dramatic settings, not just the focus on two characters doing an action.
Yeah.
Evolution.
I also think that going with the comic style let us put more of our flavor into it than an MCU or a more kind of movie-based version would. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just being able to have like that, the visual language, and I mean, how many MODOKs do you get in the comics? Lots! Literally, we haven't even started on MODOKs. But like that visual style, like we started, was just like the Gamma launch, right? It's two characters, there's some action lines, but as you watch us, we start adding in those backgrounds, we start adding in more characters. Josh loves shoving in 5 characters and a tactic card for one person.
Love it.
I mean, you've really proven a droid at doing that, because when we started, we're like, we need minimal focus focus points. And to be able to understand what's going on, it's only an LCG card that's so big. And every time you manage to get more and more characters. Like we looked at the Apocalypse art yesterday during our Survival of the Fittest panel, and like that has 7 characters in it.
Yeah. And a
One
full
who takes
background.
up most of the frame, and it has a full background, and it has a foreground, and it has a. So yeah, it has been really wild. One of the things I like about the 3 cards that we showed too, is that you can see elements that have made it into the evolution in all 3 of the different ones. So Dallas talks about finding ourselves, right? You have that comic book, that really heavy classic comic book look in Gamma Launch. You have a bit of the modern like coloring and stuff from the Disarm art.
Right.
And then you have that really, I think all you've got, like the way Thanos is fully rendered, right? Plus all of the characters that have been knocked out around him. Like all of those things, those are touch points that we kind of started to gravitate towards and lock onto. The other thing that was really fun about those early days, and still to this day, as you pointed out in some of as we went through like the different Apocalypse art, as we're going to talk about when we talk about making Team Tactic cards, but we work with a wide variety of different artists. And each artist obviously has their own style.
Right.
And it's our job to kind of be like, okay, follow these guidelines, but also be yourself. We're working with these artists to have that. And especially in those early days, it was like, well, we don't really know what we want, so just do what you do, artists.
Do what you do. And we started finding our voice and like giving more direction and having more rules. Josh has rules,
Right.
But
He's
defining what those rules are.
I mean, I honestly couldn't have said it better. Like, so the reality is, it's obvious. The core set and the first few waves of products were there to set the foundation, right? Of what we're doing, of what we wanted to do with our version of Marvel, the Marvel universe, right? And one of the things that, in addition to style, it's also content. If you notice, the original older cards were more about trying to show what MCP is, right? These different combinations of different characters that you maybe not normally might see, like, except in like big storylines or whatever, right? We want to really reinforce the idea that you could play anything with anything, right? And so that was probably the first year and a half was just trying to make sure that we reinforced it through the art, through everything that we did, and through obviously the core box, and I mean everything we could. And then as years have gone on, we feel we've done a good job of establishing that. I think we've sort of we have that now. So now it's been almost becoming flipping it on its head and being more of like a love letter to the comics, right? So there's a lot more sort of like thematic things tied to the stories and to the different characters. We like to mix and match every once in a while when it makes sense, but for the most part, we want to tell when it's a Spider-Man set, the cards are usually themed around a Spider-Man thing or X-Men, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, like I mean, it is. You guys said it perfectly too. There is and that's pretty honest and pretty vulnerable to say. Like we were learning as we were going along. Like so there was. I mean, so there's a lot of like figuring out like, hey, just do this thing and then let's see if it works or not, right? Like both like visually, but also like in the card size, and also like does it read well, right? Does it feel the way? So if you do notice the first year or two, there's a wide range of different styles and different approaches. And then we realize both we like that, but we want to keep it in this realm, or we want to refine it to look like this. So those of you lucky enough to have the classic stuff, because we do tend to redo some of the art and refresh and whatever. So those of you that have the old stuff,
I mean, CPO1's still out there.
It is still out there. It is still out there.
But I don't know for how much longer, but there's still copies out there.
So get it,
for
get
the
it.
collectors.
But you will see a studio learning, like as we're going, right?
Well, they learned last night in the retrospective, like the truncated timelines, and we're developing an idea, but we don't have the full plan yet. So
right.
And that's really what, as you start to move into this art of
the
Earth's mightiest.
Yeah. One of the biggest keystones, which we can bring Marco in on, and if Tony wants to bring up that slide that showed the original character card, there's a lot of graphic design stuff that our team Jesse did. We're going to jump into that. But the original character art done by Amelia Vidal of X-Men 97 fame.
Literally went from us to X-Men 97.
Yep, unfortunately, we lost Amelia to her X-Men 97 job, but she did all of the original healthy characters.
Yep.
Those really, I think, became the cornerstone of where we built everything out. Like it defined not just the art, but also the sculpts, right? And how you and Dallas kind of looked at how these characters would be in miniature, and if you want to talk about that process a little bit.
Yeah, it was, I mean, what Josh said, it was like very much parallel with what our experience was in the sculpting realm. where it was like we took advantage of the fact that, Dallas, I think we both spoke early on of like the idea that we want to continue that spirit of where Marvel allows artists to express themselves in their style.
Right.
Yep.
And so the sculptors were like no different. We're like, yeah, like give us what you're like good at, but now like make, this character from Marvel in your like style.
In your style, but with
And-
that AMG twist.
And then obviously we have to then, check and make sure like does this actually translate to a miniature because a lot of times, and I think you brought up a good point, Simone, about like going to the comic route versus like what people think of like the films. Like they have absurd amount of like set designers and fashion designers who are making tiny intricate details on the plating and on the suit and all these threads and all these tiny things that just won't translate in a 3D miniature. Right, and so a lot of the comic art is already geared and styled to be flashy and seen from afar to recognize who this character is, their colors and everything from just a distance, which is like exactly what we do with sculpts. Yeah.
And Marvel was very supportive in us finding our own like style and giving us a creative vision on what these characters will look like, either in the art or in the sculpts.
And then there were a couple other foundational elements. Tell me if you want to bounce back to that first slide that shows the original core box. Some of the things that came back to the idea of, okay, we're going to set ourselves very firmly in comics, right? The packaging design, we came up with the idea and pitched that we wanted it to kind of mimic a comic book cover. So you're going to have these really cool ideas, but we had the little bug in the corner, right? The little issue number, and you always get that. We even joked about putting a approved by the Comics Authority, right? Up there, you have this bar, the UPC being on the front, right? Was a huge thing.
It was a huge thing.
It was a huge thing that we fought for and kind of had to explain the overall like design visuals and stuff. But we were really really trying, and that's where it is, right? Because that's where you want it for the retailer or for the store or the comic book owner to be able to like zap it in really quick. And so we mimicked a lot of those elements. Then we went over to like the Daily Bugle, the original Crisis cards, trying to feel like they're J. Jonah Jameson's
We were
newspaper.
so proud of those when we did those. We were so proud. We were like, oh man, that's how you do it.
And then you have, the comic book panels for abilities on the stat card, using a lot of colors. Like we made a statement very early on that we wanted to avoid pure blacks in only a few spots for contrast. So it's on the name plates, and that's done for the original idea was that eventually we would have to put it into other languages rather than English. So it's a reverse black plate, which makes it black. But you have this explosion of color and everything else. And Jesse, our now graphic design director, worked with us freelance at the time before they got brought on board. And Jesse just did a phenomenal job of taking all these disparate elements and these ideas and honing them into something that really kind of set the stage. And then, of course, because we're talking about 5 years of development, we now look at where we are now, right? And actually, there's a stat card, as many people know who've been playing the game for a while, in the middle of this, kind of the mid-evolution of what got us to the modern age of Crisis Protocol. But you can see those elements still kind of there, but also our understanding of what production needs from Blackplate and multilingual and how to make that process better and easier for our partners, moving things out of a box so that the whole text box is simply scalable for whatever they need to do, things like that. And then, of course, the upgrade to the art and everything else, and we'll start talking about that as well. One of the big pivot points for people, which they may or may not know, is that Josh originally joined us as a marketing manager and then shifted over to become an art director, which was, I think, your a long-time dream and something that you were very passionate about. So it was fun to give you that opportunity. And that began a new age of evolution and change of art. So we can talk a little bit about how, you taking the reins shifted things over.
Yeah, as was probably discussed last night, like there was very few of us in the beginning, right? So we all wore multiple hats, and with things sort of evolving and shifting, we realized we needed someone to sort of run the art. So for a little while, I was kind of doing both, and then as the studio expanded, I was graciously allowed to I was given a choice, which meant I probably did okay in both, right? Like I did all right, and they just gave me a choice, which felt pretty nice. And I went with the art, which was.
You were in charge of first Ministrav, right?
And the Gen Con, like those were really. But we so I sort of tackled it, but it was fun because we still work collaboratively. We still looked at all the art, which we still do to this day, and we were all still trying to figure out that feel, right, and that evolving process of what we wanted to do and what was working, what wasn't. But once I was able to solely focus on the art, and we were able to have that, it was more about refining that, right? Like seeing what worked and like really move it forward to the next step and sort of starting to figure out what our studio voice is. Like I like to think of it kind of like in the beginning, we allowed the artists to express themselves in the comic style to show how the game worked, right? So again, we would combine characters. Now we did kind of the opposite, where we have our style, and we're using our style as a love letter to the comics, right? So like to sort of honor the comics. So, but again, it took a couple of years before we sort of found how we wanted to sort of make everything a little bit cohesive, and what the principles were of, where things are more cohesive. Spoiler alert, the character cards, and then where we can get kind of crazier, the tactic cards, right? But yeah, it was, and then of course as the studio grew and we got more people and we got other art directors, and Preston. I mean, I just learned so much, and I learned so much from you guys, I know the touchy-feely one was last night, but let me just tell you.
You can have your moment.
No, I know. But, like the reality is, like anyone else, I felt I was very nervous, and, there's still a lot of imposter syndrome happening. But the reality is when I started, Dallas and Shick obviously were very hands-on, and while they were also learning too, right? But in the years, they've really learned, they realized they can trust me, right? And they can trust the team more, right? That they realize that I'm not going to like ruin everything, horribly, every single time, what I mean?
No one ever thought that.
Yeah. But like, so not like, so, and that was happening while they were also learning things themselves. Like one of the things that we've talked about is realizing the difference. One of the hardest lessons to learn creatively is realizing the idea of, is something wrong, or is it just that I don't like it, right? Like, is that hand or face wrong, right? Is it weird, or is it just my personal taste, right? Mm-hmm. And like, I had to learn that, and what was amazing was I had, again, like touchy-feely, my two bosses here, like three bosses, but these two in particular, like they learned that and they admitted it. Like they should have just went like, hey, like after a while, they were like, hey, yeah, I was being a little too picky here and there, and they learned to back off, and they've given us so much more like freedom and more like creative like trust that we have between us and our artists, and we can pass it along to our artists. Like I hopefully it shows in the art, right? Like legitimately, that's that. I don't know. Like that's just one of the great blessings of being able to work in the art and work here in the studio is that trust and that collaboration. I love it.
I want to hear if that's also true in your experience, Marco.
My experience was a little different. I didn't go through the same journey, the same route, because like I came here as a digital engineer, and then I went into the sculpting director position as we grew, and then we added more people to my department. So it was really more of like learning the trade of hard plastic, and then combining that with like, it also has to look like a spectacular art piece that you can display on your shelf and be proud of it, because you're putting so many hours of your painting work and your hobbying. And then people have their own journeys in that. They want to showcase it. So being able to create a sculpt that is good enough that regardless of whatever your painting ability is, it's going to look great on the shelf is the goal.
Right.
But it's really, I think it was more of like understanding the collaboration that you are now having with people outside of the studio that are in the community, that are playing the games and collecting.
How was the moment of, when we did Earth's Mightiest, right? We kind of said, okay, we've hit our stride creatively. We know what we would have done if we could go back and relaunch a core box, and let's take that into the thing. You can see the difference in the covers, but obviously, it's not just the art, it's not just the graphic design in that, but it's the miniatures. We had that opportunity to go back and do new versions of the same characters from that original cast, and obviously you look Captain America, Red Skull. In every aspect, there's differences. But how is that from a sculpting standpoint to be like, we're gonna go back to these characters, and how are we gonna change that? How did that evolve with the overall process of the studio, and what you had all learned from a sculpting standpoint?
Yeah,
and I think both you and Dallas can talk to that.
For me, it was really exciting because, like, to revisit things, like, cause you and Dallas, and I think you go off a lot on the streams saying that when we're working on something and we're done with it, like, we're like, we can do
We
we could have done better. Like, our drive is always like, we could always push it. There's always room to push it. And
why didn't we do this?
why didn't we do X, Y, and Z, you know, or we could have done a little more of this, a little less of that. And so the learning and the process of how we're splitting our miniatures, but how we can then push like effects and posing and get more creative, especially with the schedule that we had for this one. Like, we can then like start doing some really interesting and neat techniques. Like, I really like the Black Widow that we did with her kneeing the Ultron bot, and that upper half is held by her knee and stuff, and like things like that. Whereas like we could then evolve it. Like, Evan was then iterating on effects, and that's what then led to a lot of these big ones, like the binary Captain Marvel binary mode, and all the different splash.
I have a folder
yeah.
of all the effects from like just research that I keep. Yeah. I just kept sending you and Evan.
Yeah, and
we're look at this.
Yeah, we're looking at anime. We're looking at all these
watch
different
this cartoon.
inspirations.
Watch this movie. Look how the shape moves across the ground. Like, how do we replicate that in 3 dimensions?
So then that we can get that same energy. And so that was the whole idea. Is like, push the energy, push the posing, push everything, and then also refine.
I mean, even the anatomy though has changed a little bit in terms of like,
absolutely.
You look at Captain America in that art to Captain America in that art. He gained a lot of abs, and if you look at the sculpt, right, the sculpt really does mimic the visual design language of what's there. Because the original Captain America, he's got he looks more like that core box art. You look at the new Captain America, and he's very shredded these days.
Yeah, I mean, to echo what you said, like the journey of learning through the process, and that like we then started refining our style and being like, okay, we have that now. Let's lean into the bombastic comic,
lean into the comic.
Lean into the comic and just lean in, because
sometimes their traps are just huge.
Yeah,
you have to be.
And it looks great, like the silhouette, the shape language, and everything. It looks great. Like, it's fun and it's it's punchy.
Yeah.
I think that's that word right there, silhouette. Right, when we're working in miniature, we look.
You
at
could probably start
so
jumping
much.
through to some of the character side by sides, because I think it lines up right along with this, Tony.
Oh yeah. But silhouette, even on art, on the miniatures, like, it's such a big part of the language in comics.
Especially for comics. Yeah.
We were talking about earlier, right? The comics, it's all about reading that image from, you walk into anywhere and you see Captain America on a poster, it's Captain America from across the room, it's Spider-Man. And so really leaning into those silhouettes, how to define those silhouettes, how to push those silhouettes, like taking Captain America and pushing that V shape. Shick, you always say, I want that V cut. I want that V cut.
See that superhero cut.
Yeah, you want those broad shoulders and those narrow hips, right? Big legs, you want that action and that punch and that real dramatic visual language. And then posing, you mentioned, we talked last night that the original core box was designed for soft plastic. Doc Ock is standing on his feet.
Yeah.
And that's because we thought we were going to do soft plastic. And then when we found out hard plastic, we were immediately like,
we're going to add a beaker with a little
he needs to be up in the air. Like, so it's immediately like you want to see what you can do with that new material, because it allows you to push those new silhouettes, those new ideas, those new designs.
Yeah.
Oh my God. That Wolverine is still just look at,
Yeah, Patrick Brown, right?
Patrick and Carlos
The new one,
Cabrera.
Carlos, yeah.
Yeah.
And, yeah, go ahead. Talk a little bit about the stylistic differences. And again, this kind of ties back to what we talked about, right? A lot of the original art, very classic comic.
Yeah.
A lot of the new art, we've kind of moved as a studio into this more rendered, modern comic look.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like we, the old stuff is gorgeous still, right? And it has a really, I have a soft spot for it in my heart, And it they set the foundation. It was kind of like the pioneering work for what MCP would be, while still sort of honoring the comics roots. But then, as the years went on, we kind of made decisions about, okay, what is our studio style? How do we want our characters to look, and then where do we, let the artist play? And again, those are the team tactic cards. But yeah, it was a lot of, while we were trying to figure out the new layout for the cards, for example, right? We realized, we might have more room, right? So maybe we can zoom in a little more.
Maybe we can put an entire tiger with wings on it.
Or you can put an entire tiger with wings on it, right? Or,
Why does that always get brought up?
Because I think outside of that new Ghost Rider piece that we just saw with his full flaming chopper, That was easily the biggest thing to try to fit into that stat block window.
Absolutely.
Look at that, Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
Look, well, yeah, I mean, and that's a perfect example, like Shick said, like Ghost Rider, like we would have loved to put Ghost Rider on his bike back in the old day in the art. We didn't have the room, right?
I mean, there was room. I think there was also just the generalized like rules of concepts, right? We didn't have characters with accoutrement. We didn't have them with other stuff because we wanted just the character. It was a bit more a lot like how animation studios or any visual like studio, right? It evolves over time and it grows. It gets better at what it does, or it changes its mind, it changes its style.
Exactly.
And then there's also just the 5 years in terms of the technology and the tools available to artists. That also just progresses their skills.
Exactly.
Right? So you wouldn't get the Ghost Rider from 5 years ago today.
Right.
Even if you asked for the same thing, it would still look different because the techniques have changed and evolved.
Absolutely. And then in addition to that, we realized that, so one of the things we needed to like bring up is that in the early days, we were also trying to figure out how much animation, not just comics, but how much animation do we want to bring into like the look of the art, right? And that was something we were sort of trying to play with for a while. So you saw a lot of the more animated style to the original characters. And now we have that, but we figure out kind of like the AMG animation style, which seems to be more about muscles and like big jaws, big jaws.
Hero stuff.
The knuckles need to be white.
Just white knuckle again. But also, again, having those sort of modern comic book things of changing the line weights and having more of like a cell shaded look. Those were some of the things that we sort of decided to move on as we moved on to Earth's Mightiest Corset, which really it was one of the big, like if it. Don't realize that that was the big moment, right? That was the big, like we're gonna take what we had learned for years and put it, do or die. Can we put it all together and reach a new level, right? Like, have we learned, from what we did before, and are we stronger? And I feel ultimately we did. We did.
That's a great segue because right at the same time that process was going on with the update to Crisis Protocol, we were also working secretly on a brand new project, which was Star Wars Shatterpoint. And I think it's difficult, even though they're different brands, Shatterpoint benefited from the idea that I think we as a studio had found our creative vision, like our creative niche, in terms of the things that we wanted to do, the things we liked. And so when we were going through and discussing, okay, we're going to make this new skirmish game, how are we going to differentiate it? What are we going to do that's going to be really exciting and eye-grabbing for a property that people have seen over and over? And you and I, Dallas, like we're instantly like 90s anime.
We were
like,
it wasn't even a conversation.
No, it was.
You're like Shatterpoint, and we both at the same time was just like the intro to every 80s and 90s anime.
You think about that incredible like Thundercats opening sequence where it's just amazing. Like all of them, right? All of them. It was much like comic book covers. Saturday morning cartoon intros are always like visually
this is going to be amazing, and then it starts.
What you get next because they only had to draw that once. They had to draw these things like 5,000 times, right? And they got to be quick about it. But that's where we went. And I think some of that, and then it was okay. Well, we're doing this with Crisis Protocol. How are we going to be different? And I think Crisis Protocol wound up in a much more modern take, whereas Shatterpoint, we really leaned heavily into that 90s animated anime influence of the styling and the characterization of facial features and all of this stuff.
The body language, the once again the silhouettes, right? That
everyone's leaner and taller.
Lean. We want that in the sculpts, those lean, tall, sharp lines. Like we always say, Shatterpoint the cloth, Shatterpoint the cloth, Shatterpoint. Like the Shatterpoint cloth has a rule set that we follow, and we always try to hit in that 90s, 80s animated, just fun, over-the-top action. You're going for a wild ride.
Because I don't come from a visual background, I am all on the business side. One of my favorite experiences with Shatterpoint was you showing me, do you like this one or this one? This one or this one? Because I don't have the words to explain what I like.
Right.
But he did so many like A,
That's
B.
not true.
If it's about...
The helmet's a little...
Yeah.
You do have words. You have your own language when it comes to it.
He's got too much.
And we've learned how to interpret it, but you certainly don't have the classical terms,
Thank
the
you.
classical art terms.
But we understand them.
We
But
do
you have
get
to be
it.
in person for the
Oh,
year.
100%,
You get
yeah.
the whole. It's a somatic language.
Yeah,
It requires all of
It
the
does.
motions. Yeah, and then obviously, so what we did is we kind of established a lookbook. We said these are the things we want to draw from. We pulled from, things like Macross and other places just across all the gamut. And then we turned that over to Preston, who is our
great
art director,
Preston
director,
Stone.
and
we sculpted
he
three
had done
miniatures.
all of the Star Wars games
This is a reveal.
before. This is, but this one was a you, Josh, wasn't it?
Yeah.
This was.
I got lucky.
You got tagged in for this one.
Yeah, Preston does so much work. He allowed me to do 4 little pieces,
Yeah.
and I'm pretty proud of him.
But so then, it was really interesting. So we gave it to Preston. He started working on an exemplar character, which was Anakin Skywalker. We figured Anakin was a good one because he lived both in, the Clone Wars animated series and he lived in the movies, right? So we had real world and we had animated world, and Shatterpoint's goal was to kind of blend those two together in a new and unique way, and Anakin being one of the top tier characters of the franchise was a great start. So we started, this is actually the second Anakin, it's not the first. We did have a first one. This was the evolution beyond that. And that Anakin became kind of the touch point, the cornerstone for everything else that went beyond with the characters and the art.
Do you remember how many iterations this was?
The Anakin?
Oh,
I
my
remember
God.
sitting on my iPad at home, like drawing in things and being like, this is wrong and we need to change the jawline here. And even I had to get into doing things that I wasn't comfortable with to try to explain where the problems were and try to, match colors and blend jawlines to make them sharper and all of this. It was... we put Preston through a lot to get it right because
Beautiful
we knew
man.
we
He
needed
did it,
to.
yeah.
Yep.
He worked
And,
so hard. It was a lot of
Yes.
work, and it was amazing because I would get to sit in some of the meetings and watch you 3 and you 4 trying to figure it out from the beginning, right? And seeing and then seeing Preston just take these notes and just being like, okay, how am I going to interpret them? And then also seeing how open you guys were to different suggestions, from the original, right? Like the iterations, right? And ending up in a really stronger place because of it, right? And to a place where Lucasfilm really seemed to like a lot of we ended up doing pretty good.
We definitely won them around.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was collaboration and conversation. Obviously, when we presented our crazy idea and said, what do you think? If Star Wars was a 90s, 80s animated cartoon on Saturday mornings, what do you think?
Yeah.
And they were like, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, we're willing to look at it, right?
Yep.
And from there, we just started showing them iterations and be like, this is what we like, this is what we don't. Tell us what you like, what you don't. And we eventually got to this point to where, we started integrating blade motion. So a lot of the saber motions and effects that we had avoided quite heavily on art before, to really incentivize that style and discussions like, is this too far? Is this not too far? Talking with our good friends at LFL about that and getting all that stuff in. There's always a push-pull with how much glow you can do, which drives Dallas crazy. How much source lighting is too much source lighting?
All the source lighting.
Is rim lighting okay? Is it not on these standalone characters? Where's the line? But it was a really rewarding, if not arduous, process that took a long time to get.
Yeah.
And of course, one of the problems with that is that until we had established the artistic style, it was very difficult for Marco and his team to start on the sculpts.
Sculpting, yep.
I mean, that was also. We did the Mandalorian with Javier.
Yep.
And
that one was
the
really
first
easy
one.
because he's like, how do you stylize
That's
him?
not true.
He's in armor.
Well, that was the first sculpt for Shatterpoint.
Yep.
Oh,
that was
yeah,
the first
yeah, yeah.
Shatterpoint sculpt.
And then that was like you said, it's armor and cloth. So that was a very easy one, you minimize this, do this, and do that. But then it was now the characters' faces and the likenesses and where we
Anakin
blending
was,
that. Yeah.
and
you
much
we had to
same.
print heads.
That was your promotion point. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, I did.
I did the first 3. Anakin,
I
Asajj,
transitioned, yeah.
and Ahsoka. And then I was like,
Here you go.
you gotta do this forever.
Yeah, and so then we printed you out.
And didn't do it better.
We printed you out heads of Anakin, and then you painted them to see what worked, because then the trouble was without color, where's the light? Is it looking enough
Where's the light, right.
like the person, or is is it too much? And where is that line? And so
Or how many malls did I paint? like
Yeah.
20 mall heads probably, like working on the design and what's best
Should
for
we-
painting,
should we
raised,
include,
inset.
all of that, and all this back and forth on those tiny little details. Like, is it an enjoyable experience? Is it a terrible experience to paint and hobby together and stuff like that?
And
All
then
ended up being fun.
and then on top of all of that, right, we also had to design. We needed to go to our famed graphic design team, especially the one and only Ryan Ritter, whose name has been mentioned a lot with the Star Wars refresh in design and everything, and effectively be like, hey, we need a brand new Star Wars game that fits these things and need that. And he and Jesse and several of the other designers on the team, but primarily those two, like they went to work. Ritter created a whole new symbol language for it.
Awesome.
Worked closely with Dev to be like, okay, these are the icons we need. We have these crazy combat trees. We need these things, and whereas everything else, sculpts, art, and all of that was a constant back and forth in collaboration with LFL. That symbol language was one and done.
Really?
Like,
Yes.
it was
Really?
basically just
Yeah,
like,
it was done.
here are
I
all the
did not know
symbols we
that.
want to use. Here's what they are.
Really?
Yeah.
And they were just like,
He
great.
has never seen its like. Is the
That's true. That
like-
is what our LFL.
That was like
that
the
like
quote.
we took
I
the
did not know
paper, we took printouts to LFL with everything, and I have never seen its like. And we were done.
Yeah, I was just done. So
So we'll get
wild.
Ritter to sculpt.
that's
We'll
right.
get
We
Ritter
just-
to
art,
to do
please.
art.
we just need to clone Ryan Ritter and have him learn all these other skills, and he
mediums.
will speak the Star Wars language. But no, obviously we have an incredibly talented team at all levels. But he, like we discussed before, Ryan, he's just tuned into the language, the design language of Star Wars in a way that it just kind of like processes in and comes out, and LFL completely understands it. And
He's got that passion.
it's a wonderful asset to have, because
Yeah.
it means that whenever we show new packaging designs like the Legion stuff or anything like that, things that they normally would never approve somehow just get through.
Yeah.
Like they're just
Amazing.
like, if anyone else had done it, they'd be like, I don't think you can do it this way. But then it's like, here's this. You don't even tell them who did it. You just watch, and they're like, looks great. I love it. I love everything about it. And you're just like, I don't get it. So somebody got charmed by a Jin
That's
at
amazing.
one point in their life.
So let me ask a question. So, and this is tied this for you and for the sculpting. Like, so one thing we do talk about, and did talk about, is it's its own original AMG style with some animation. We do look at the Clone Wars show,
Yeah.
right?
yeah,
We do
yeah.
look.
Oh, yeah.
And what was the challenge of like taking those, even though they're 3D animated, they're still on TV, and making them into a 3-dimensional miniature, right? And like getting them in angles that maybe you don't see very often, right? Like that must have been not easy, right?
So imagine that, but the person giving you direction only goes shh, 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 when the helmet is the wrong shape, and then
Right.
Kevin in another room interprets what I have said,
Right.
and with the sounds. Yes.
Yeah, it was a lot of
Kevin is magic, so yes.
Yes.
the vast majority of it, right, was saying, okay, we know what Clone Wars animation or Rebels animation
Right.
looks like, right? This is the LFL animation style,
Right.
but we're not trying to do that.
Right.
And then you have a lot of the times touch points in the live action,
Right.
and the problem becomes is that both of those are canonically approved versions of that character.
Right. Right.
And we, as stewards of Lucasfilm, whenever we make anything for the games, have to maintain a canonical representation, right? Because
Right.
whatever we're making is assumed to be in that official realm of like,
Right.
this is how the character would look in X, Y, or Z.
Right.
So everything that we do for Shatterpoint effectively is LFL approving that in the world of Star Wars Shatterpoint, which
That
is
is-
now part of the LFL family.
That is how.
This is what this
Okay.
character would look like.
Right.
Right. And so that's where the challenge becomes, because you're drawing from these different influences to try to hit that correct LFL mark.
Right.
And how do you do that, and where do you bring that in?
I feel like one of the earlier ones, I mean, there were several characters that were like that, but I remember Dooku and Asajj were
Oh, yeah.
particular ones that, like, getting the likeness in particular,
Yeah.
like, how do you mix
Where that-
the animation versus
Yeah.
ours versus,
And
It's like
Yeah.
the little
Yep.
spectrum gradient of like live action to Clone Wars animation, and then it's like, where do you slide it?
And none of them are the same spot.
right,
None of
yeah,
them are the
yeah,
same.
right. It's
And
by
like-
feel, right?
Because
It's
then,
just a
you
feel.
have some characters
Very much
who've
is.
never appeared in the animation and
Right.
they only exist in live action,
Right.
or vice versa,
Vice
you know,
versa.
and you have to then figure it out. Luckily, the Clone Wars and Rebels, like the artists and sculptors who were on that production, do document heavily like their
Yeah.
work on their
Yep.
portfolios and stuff. So you can see the shape language, what transitions they're doing to then kind of emulate a little bit of that.
And
get
also
that inspired.
impressively enough, a lot of the designers behind those shows actually do 3D sculpts of the characters in Mancat.
Like that you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you can actually go and see like this is what it looks like in 3 dimensions and not animated, and those things can be very helpful in that.
Sometimes then I just am like, I like them both, you know. So like we
You
did
find
like
a spot in between. Yeah.
like the Sith the Sith hunters or the Jedi hunters, like the you had they had alternate heads for both, you know, more animated
the live
and
action and the
and we like that idea because
Rebels.
yeah.
Okay, I want to jump now to Star Wars Legion.
Yeah.
We've spent a lot of the week so far talking about the refresh, so we're not gonna go super in depth into it because we had the panel on Thursday where we showed off all the new art,
a lot of art,
talked a lot about the evolution and everything. We had the roadmap where we discussed that more. So I feel like hopefully people have kind of seen in real time at this point, rather than a retrospective. It's a now-spective,
a future-spective,
a presentism.
Presuspective.
Yes, a presuspective. I don't know.
Presuspective.
It might just be a spective of this whole process as we're all living it. But I do want to take a moment and really just kind of go through and look at some of the changes and the alterations to the art piece, to the style. I want to show off the new packaging, which I don't think we've done yet.
We have not.
So let's just jive through that. And I'm told that Preston has entrusted you with his blades.
Yeah, I have some notes.
With his blades today. So
I have some
you are now honor bound to carry him.
Do we want to start with the logo?
I'll do the best.
I don't know. I think it's art first, according to everything. Tony's like, whatever, I'll just click wherever. This is an entirely different Tony than this morning when it was just, I'm going to hit the space bar.
We'll start with the logo.
So here's
Spacebar Tony.
Brand new logo, of course, done by Mr. Ryan Ritter. Really, the big thing here was we just wanted something that was a bit more standout, a bit more colorful, that it felt adventurous, right? That really drew you into the idea.
Feels like the sun is rising.
Yeah, it's got that Star Wars twin suns, Luke on Tatooine kind of vibe to it. It's bold. It makes it feel it's inviting. It kind of draws you in, and then you have the R brush, which you're going to see as a recurring theme that says Legion underneath.
Yeah.
And it was just a fun way to kind of extra tie into Star Wars and the idea that you're going to go into this amazing galaxy far, far away when you start playing this game. I don't know. Do you have anything else, Simone?
No, I am excited to go to art.
Oh,
I'm
let's do
watching
it.
what Tony's doing.
Oh, okay. You're just monitoring, making sure he's on track. Wait, this is not.
This is Shatterpoint art.
This is Shatterpoint, Tony. What are you doing?
My reveal for the end, but which is now, and I just touched my mic. I'm so sorry, everyone.
That's the excitement
the
level.
excitement.
Drink another Monster, Tony. You need it. You're off your game today, my man.
So one of the things I'm quoting Preston, the great Preston here, is that obviously Legion's art has always been more painterly and more in the realistic sense, which is almost the exact sort of opposite thing of Shatterpoint, because you're focusing on live action things, and there are some things, as we said, have never been in live action, right? So how do you translate those? Well, the answer is it's not easy. It is not easy. But one of the big shifts in the new look of Legion from before is in the unit cards is before there was a focus on the single character, as you're seeing here. But as you'll start seeing more in the unit cards and in some of the command cards, there's more of a narrative element, right? And each piece of art is telling a story more and is featuring more characters,
Partly based on the idea that the new designs for the cards and stuff that we've shown from Ryan have that immaculate window,
right,
to turn them into this more trading card kind of feel on the back.
Exactly. So this piece by Daniel Zrom is actually, like we've shown in other things, it's a triptych. It's actually 3 images in one image, which I haven't seen it cut up, but I've seen this one. I mean, it's incredible. But yeah, you can tell that there's a narrative component to this, right? Whereas in some of the more classic Legion, it might have been just 1 or 2 of the Ewoks, right? You're kind of seeing them more as a group and kind of getting that in-setting kind of feel. That's sort of the new goal for this current iteration of Legion. And then so Legion's also always trying to focus as much as it can both on realism, but having nice, bright, interesting colors, right? And that's something that Preston and his team are really trying to push really hard. This was interesting because obviously, Geonosis is such a monochromatic planet, but you do little things like, well, their weapons are so use those
touches.
exactly. So you use those to kind of focus in and hone in. And this is another one. I believe this might have been a cover too. I believe.
This is another one of those tritexts.
A triptych. That's right. That's
split
right.
up between the unit, Sunfac, and
Oh,
Hoggle.
that's right.
Hoggle the Lesser.
And there's more.
Excuse me. I guess I better add the lesser.
But there's
Which
also,
is a little insulting, Tim.
That's
I
what I
just
was saying.
realized.
I was just
maybe
gonna call
you're
it
better.
Hoggle
Just
and leave it
Hoggle of the
alone.
mini bracelets.
It's fine.
It's cultural.
yeah, maybe it's a
being
good thing.
greater is real bad.
Yeah, real bad. Real
Who
bad.
knows?
But you can also see a more focused, like more rendered backgrounds, right? To really show the environments too, in addition to the characters. That's a big thing moving forward with Legion things.
We've sort of lifted the.
More motion too,
Yes.
really, like
Motion.
As
overall,
we can-
right? Like action and motion, especially this Luke piece here.
Yeah.
Pushed the dark down just a little touch and brought out the more personality of the whole scene.
This, I mean, honestly, he's got a couple notes, but I just guess this is an incredible Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
Like, this might be one of my favorite Luke Skywalker
The
images
look
I've
on
ever
his face.
seen. Like, and again, it has, the more camelness, but not entirely, right? Like, it's got its own. It's like Dallas was saying. It's got these like levers you kind of have to push, right? And again, it changes per character. Like, to me, this feels so much like Luke Skywalker, right? And it feels, and again, you've got that motion, that heroicness, right? And it really puts you in time and place that where this could be. Like, and the goal is to do this.
Yeah. You really feel like one of the things I love about the expression on this character and the eyes and everything that's done right is you feel like this is the farm boy who finally got to go on the adventure he wanted.
Exactly.
And he's having fun.
And like he's in, as opposed to when you start looking at the Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker art that people will see eventually that was redone, where you see like the seriousness, right? The adult nature of I've grown into my role as a guardian and the responsibilities behind it.
Exactly.
And life is not an adventure. This is absolutely the guy who crash lands on Dagobah and starts like threatening locals with his blaster pistol for just like showing up behind him while he's trying to eat dinner, right?
And one of the, in addition to that, one of the things more with newer Legion is like obviously you try to honor canon and make sure you have the art represent maybe what it can, but because Legion is a combat game, it has this idea that you can tell your own story, your own mission. There's this idea that you can take these characters and put them in unique places you may not have quite have seen before, right? That's a really exciting opportunity for the team, for Preston, for the artists to really help expand on the art style. And I was wondering, like, when they're doing this plan that we're seeing right here, like, I can't believe the alien tic-tac-toe X's happening here like that. That's amazing. Like,
Well, the feller on the right side does not get this plan.
He's pretty lost. The amount of story in this one image, which is command cards and stuff, is really fun, right?
The guy with the heavy blaster, he's just like, well, I'm first again.
Right. He knows what he's
He
just
knows.
point and shoot, point and shoot.
I do love that we've been able to, both in the sculpts and the art, bring so many more aliens
Oh,
into
yes. Oh, yeah.
the rebellion.
oh yeah.
Kind of in this round of how we're treating the art. As you can see from the sculpts, we've talked about all of the different like alien head options.
Right.
So
Sometimes with pressing, you have to pull back on the
It's true. It's true. There's a couple times where it's
full
like we
universe.
need to add in a couple more humans because
Yeah.
there are humans as well.
That's true.
But I think it's just the excitement of being able to do such a diverse like group, of everything.
I think that's been a
Oh,
good
and here's a big reveal. So if you were with us for the roadmap, we showed you half the image. Here's the full image, as Josh mentioned. And you'll notice that Grievous is not going to be alone on those wheel bikes. There's a couple other wheel
so
bike
sweet.
options that are becoming to support him so that you too can have your own
Is this the
motorcycle
start of
gang.
my cis army?
It is.
I
This
think
is
it
the start of your
is.
Separatist Alliance
It is.
So one
Droids of Anarchy list right
Droids
here.
of Anarchy. Can y'all hear this picture? Because I can hear this picture.
It's very revved up.
It's all revved up.
this beautiful image, and this is one of the themes I wanted to sort of close out my part on this on is, and this is legitimate. Me and Preston feel a big pressure and a big responsibility to push the art because the miniatures are so good and have always been so good, and we want to live up to that level of quality, right? The rules are so good, the painting, like the graphic design, like everyone on the team does such a great job that we want the art to live up to not just the IP and that we love so much, but also the work that the entire studio does. And this is the big, what I'm trying to say is the miniature for this thing is unbelievable. Like legitimately, like I actually
That's
thought
true.
I thought it was fake. Like I thought it was like a fake thing. You can't mass produce this thing. Apparently you can, and you did, and it's amazing.
Phenomenal. Should we look at the box?
Yeah, let's
Tony?
do
Thank
one
you.
last reveal of the box before we have to say goodbye. So again, you can kind of see all of the elements that we've talked about around Legion and everything else. The glorious artwork, being shown, the miniatures now being featured on the front of the box, and just a more poppy kind of expressive overall packaging. We've lost some of the black for grays and purples. Really, maintaining the serious tone of Legion, but also bringing in that emotion of adventure, of excitement, of a galaxy far, far away. The thing that has always attracted, I think, people to Star Wars. And to kind of hopefully instantly make it recognizable as a game, right?
Right.
As something that you can experience that invites you in and brings you on. And that became a really big part of the overall design challenge and bringing all these elements together, right? Showing off everybody's hard work, everybody's skills, and how it all comes together to make an amazing game like Legion or, Shatterpoint or Marvel Crisis Protocol, wherever it may be. But I'm in love with what Ryan and the team were able to do with the packaging now, and it just looks phenomenal.
And is that
art, though.
is that Arabesh? Oh my goodness, is that what?
I know. Like I said, it's a recurring theme. It's just going.
Tony, I'm going to make a really quick request. Josh directed a piece that I love that was directed for me, and I want to see it again.
Going back.
Josh, walk us through this.
Again, I was very lucky enough to get to do a couple pieces, and these are marketing pieces. This is by the great Elizabeth Torque, and this is a Shatterpoint, queen.
I wanted my teenage assassins, and here they are.
Yeah, and so we work with the artist to try and make
This
it.
is the new game. This is the new game.
Don't spoil it. You know what I mean?
Teenage assassins.
Okay, we can close out.
But I just want to
Tony.
point out the background terrain is Shatterpoint
I
terrain.
know,
Like it is
I
actually
know.
the Shatterpoint terrain.
So, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
All
I mean
right.
seriously, you deserve it. Seriously.
And with that, I believe that we are at the close of this 5-year visual design retrospective. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to get more art, more conversations with Josh, more conversations with Dallas, because you're coming to this one, right? I believe so.
I don't think so.
No? All right. Well, you can paint with this guy in like an hour. I guess you have to go eat lunch. But we're going to be looking at the artwork and the creation of team tactic cards and how art and dev work together to pull that stuff together. So if you found this conversation interesting, be sure to show up for that one. We're going to have some surprises as well if you play Crisis Protocol. Otherwise, thank you for joining us on this. We hope to see you at the next panel for Ministravaganza, which is starting shortly, just a few short minutes. Till then, goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks.